Zoom. Okay, recording in process. Okay, so I am going to try to upload this to our website after sometime the day after the meeting. I'm not sure how long I'll be able to leave it out there. Hopefully it'll be about a month. But as you know, Zoom takes up space in terms of recordings. So at some point we have to go in and clean it. So anyone that's not in the session today that decides to review this content, they will not receive CCEUs unless they actually attend the physical or the virtual session here. So we are excited to open up this 3-part series for our health and wellness this summer. Today is the first of 3 parts. The other 2 parts are July 27th and August the 24th. And you don't have to attend all 3 to get CCEUs. What's going to happen after each session is today you'll get 0.5 CCEUs in resource, and you'll get actually 0.5 in core and 1 in resource is what you're going to get today. And so what I'm going to do is somewhere towards the end, I'm going to interrupt Allie and ask you to put your name and email address in the chat. And throughout the session today, I'll upload that certificate a couple of times. It'll be a Word document, and you'll be able to download it onto your computers. One of the recommendations that I have for people, because things happen with computers, is to take a picture of that certificate so that in a year, when you go to do your renewals on your ACC, PCC, MCC, you'll be able to find that certificate. I like to remind people that we are a volunteer organization, and sometimes it's hard to pause and go find stuff for you and do that research. So if you could do everything you can to make sure you have a copy of that certificate, that'd be great. I'll hang out in the end to make sure that you have it. If you put that I can't download it or something in the chat box, I'll make sure that I email that to you. And so how did we arrive at today in this wellness series? So I put a call out a couple of months ago asking for our members to recommend topics for coaching coffees and webinars and that sort of thing. And Allie responded about wellness in terms of gut health. And so we got into a conversation. And one of the things that intrigued me about Allie was that I was going through something and I needed some information. So I have a 33-year-old daughter who has UC, ulcerative colitis. I have a 6-year-old granddaughter who has just been diagnosed with colitis. And it has been tough trying to figure out which direction mommy needs to go with teaching her about gut health and maybe changing her diet, trying to get away from a lot of processed foods. So Allie and I began a conversation, and I said to myself, I said, you know, maybe we should have a summer wellness series that's not necessarily focused specifically on coaching, but it's focused on the well-being of the coach. And if the coach takes care of him or herself, then they're able to ask questions of their coaching clients with regard to wellness in terms of stress, sleep, and the gut. All 3 of those things Allie is going to talk to you about because they're all interconnected. And so I am happy to introduce Allie. And Allie, MPH, the letters behind her name, she'll tell us what that means. She is an epidemiologist with expertise in preventive health. She just completed Module 1 for IPEC, so she is training to be a coach. And so this is a great opportunity for her to learn some coaching skills and to fortify her training, as well as provide us with some of the gems of her expertise. And so one of the things that I want to caution you about, and she's going to show it in a minute, but there's this fancy disclaimer. We're not giving medical advice today. We're just providing you with information. And as a reminder, we ask that if you need medical advice that you consult with your practitioner, your clinician, your medical expert before implementing anything or any good ideas that you might take from this session or anything that's on our website. And so let's see, where am I? So the next session or section is, I talked about July 22nd is the second. session, and August 24th is this third session. Certificates will be in the chat. Somewhere along the line, I'll be asking for your name and email address. We're going to hold our questions to the end. Allie is going to put her email address in the chat should you have further questions and we're not able to get further into your curiosity during this session. Any questions before we get started with Allie? All right, Allie, take it away.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Stephanie. It has been an absolute joy to work with you. And as you mentioned, I am a really new coach. Just last week, I finished Mod 2 through IPEC. And so frankly, everybody, I'm pretty nervous being here with all of you expert coaches. I am embarking on a topic that has a lot of curiosity for me, but I'm by no means an expert on the microbiome. This is a fascinating field that we're really on the frontier of. That's one of the reasons why I was so excited to bring this to us in our wellness series, because I really do believe, like Stephanie said, it'll help us coaches take better care of ourselves, be fully present for our clients, and be at the top of our game. And it might even open up some opportunities to have conversations to empower your clients with the same kind of curiosity and drive to go learn more about what they can do to support their own health and well-being, and how interconnected our internal and external systems are. So why did I personally embark on trying to figure out the microbiome and this really complex relationship between our brain and our gut? Well, frankly, I started to see my weight creep up a little bit. I'm 52 and, I run a lot and I exercise a lot. There's not a lot more I can do to keep the weight under control. And there's that old adage, you can't outrun a bad diet. And so that kind of haunted me a little bit. I was like, maybe I need to take a look at this because, if it starts creeping up, that's a trajectory. I'm a data person, right? That's a trajectory that I can put a slope on. And I wasn't really liking that slope. So I was also tired and, perimenopausal symptoms were also on my mind. What is the relationship between our gut, our diet, and perimenopausal symptoms? That got me curious. I thought maybe, the couple of drinks of wine, or I do like my bourbon, might not have been so great as well. So I was just really honestly curious about how I could more intentionally eat, and would there really be an effect? I treat my body a little bit like a machine. I just put food in that I know is pretty high quality and expect a lot of it. And at this point in life, it was time to go a little bit deeper. I was also, frankly, a little bit of a skeptic. I've been hearing a lot about gut health. You might be as well in the lay media, and you might be wondering, is there anything to the hype, really? So as a natural skeptic, I decided I needed to check this out. And by the way, let's not forget, I have the munchies just like most other people. My biggest guilty pleasure is Cheez-Its, and those are something really good to reach for in the afternoon while you're a little bit of an energy low and you still have a lot of work to do. So how do the munchies play into gut health? Well, I soon found out. What have I learned? So awareness of how our diet affects our gut also in fact affects our inner world much more than I really realized. And it gave me an ability to change how I view food and how I make it serve me, versus embarking on this cycle of punishment that I constantly found myself in, where like I wouldn't eat quite right. And then that would lead to more, bad habits potentially into the evening, then waking up the next morning and feeling like I needed to pay back for what I did the night before. That's not a great way to start the day. So mindset really matters. I decided I need to take better care of this amazing machine I was given. And frankly, within a month, I had shifted from kind of a disordered, restriction-focused eating lens to a more intentional care model. And I realized that what I put into my body really affects what I get out of it. I don't have to have this, drive to crave things and then deny myself. I could actually think about what I'm doing and what I'm eating. That was very empowering. So this series is ICF aligned. We are focusing on the microbiome and its relationship to the mood, the immune system, and autoimmune conditions in the third of our series. And our goal here is to help evoke awareness. You heard me just describe my own personal awareness, but we're also hoping that it'll inspire you to have a greater awareness of how you can take care of yourself. And then that will probably naturally bleed into conversations and intentional questions for your clients. and hopefully inspire them to have some curiosity as well. In this rushed culture, very often we eat mechanically, and we're not really aware of the complex system of interactions between the trillions of microbes living in our intestinal tract and our brains and our immune system. And that's what this wellness series is focused on. So just as coaches seek to help their clients build awareness of their internal worlds so that they can grow from functional to optimal, we want to be able to live a life of abundance, and raising awareness of how the microbes living in our intestines need good food to do their jobs well. Maybe we can provoke some curiosity among our clients. That will turn into what I hope will be more maximal health. What you can do as coaches with this information, you have an opportunity to share information with your clients. If they give you permission, you can give them just enough at the right time to inspire curiosity. You might even inspire skepticism. Remember, that might be a natural response. That was my first response, and there's no harm in that. That skepticism might provoke them to go take a closer look. So don't be afraid of that. Asking your clients, how do you see this information fitting into your life, might be a way to open up a conversation and continued research. And you'll be able to provide a framework for accountability in this process as your clients try to implement perhaps different ways of having a relationship with food. So just very briefly, I am first a scientist, coming to coaching late in life here. I have a teenage boy. I have 2 teen boys, and we had a kind of unexpected situation come up in life where he took a radically different path than I thought he would. And in order to make our family system work, I realized I needed to take myself back to boot camp and figure out some different communication strategies. So I took a big bet on myself. I'm a freelancer. I don't earn very much money as a scientist. Most of my work, frankly, has been pro bono, even through the pandemic. I've been working on vaccine safety, and as an epidemiologist, have also worked with our youth ice hockey team to allow the kids to continue playing through the pandemic. So quite a bit of pro bono work, but I am a researcher as well. So I took a big bet on myself and went to IPEC to learn how to work better within my own family system. And I found such incredible joy in thinking about how I could live a more purposeful life in working with other people to help them live more abundantly. So it is a great privilege to be here with you. And my collaborator here, Stephanie, you know her very well, but I've had the privilege of getting to know her over the past few weeks as we've been developing this series for you. She's an experienced professional coach and a student of biology, I came to learn, with a lifelong love of learning. And her curiosity was apparent from the moment we exchanged emails on this topic. Stephanie has worked really hard to bring this series to you, and with coaching education credit, because she believes strongly in self-awareness and empowerment. And we'd also like to thank Dr. Marie Westbrook, who is here with us today, for her advice and guidance regarding how to make this highly technical information digestible. And you can keep score. How many times do I invoke the word gut instinct, digestible, and any other silly punny way of talking about gut health, because I'm sure I will do it. It's not intentional. It's just my way of being a little bit corny, perhaps. So stay tuned for more from Stephanie later in this presentation, because she'll be working with me to do a coaching demo. So just in brief, this is our agenda. These are the topics that we will be covering. I'm going to give you a heads up that yes, it is a little bit dense. Okay. I have, you might be able to hear me flipping papers in the background. I don't want to lose my way on this journey with you. And while I love this and know much of this information just innately and could talk conversationally with you about it, I want to be sure to get the facts right. And so slides 13 through 19 or so will be a little bit dense. If you can bear with me through that, and know that we will try to post this for you so that you can watch it again, you'll be able to implement much of what you've learned in conversations naturally with your clients. And I have 4 different checkpoints built in so that you can check your knowledge and just make sure that these words are coming naturally to you. So I'm going to focus on the high level, but give you just enough in the weeds to get you interested. We will also scaffold back on the major learning points in numbers 2 and 3 of this series. Okay, so in July and August, tune back in and we'll be going over some of the same pathways, but with different applications. Okay, So at the moment, just to get you in the frame of mind for why this matters, what does your life look like? I can tell you, I thought my life was typically more like number 2, organized chaos, and then this week hit, and it is full on bananas this week. I actually have, to keep me going, I have my 9 billion probiotic friends with me in kombucha, and you may feel similarly. I know that this is a very busy week coming up on holidays, so thank you for joining us. If you want to throw in the chat what your life currently looks like, we'd enjoy seeing what that is, just how crazy busy you are. And then take a moment to think about what your client's life looks like. You might want to think about a typical client or a client that you want to be mindful about while you're listening to this presentation, somebody you think this information might be really relevant to. So take a moment just to think of that client and think about what their life looks like, what you know about their life at this point. You don't need to put that in the chat, but just be mindful of that. Okay, just to get a sense of where everybody is, if you have a scratch piece of paper, I do see some people taking notes. That's awesome. We are going to be focusing on a couple words here that should be meaningful to you. So prebiotics and probiotics being very key words. As you look at this slide with pictures on the left and you see the numbers on each picture, write down the word prebiotic and then jot down what numbers you think fit into that category, prebiotic. And then do the same for probiotic. And we'll circle back to this at the end of the presentation so you can check what your gut instinct told you and which you might need to revise just a little bit. I hope you can read them all. Okay, hopefully, did you need more time on that? I'll go back just for a minute. Michelle, I can see you really studying this. When you're all set, give me a thumbs up, okay?
What is the total? Is that cottage cheese? I'm trying to see it. I can't see it.
That is yogurt. Sorry, by the yogurt. Yeah. This is my breakfast on the left. So, and I had this just before meeting with all of you, thinking it would give me just enough strong mental power. So flaxseed, I dump on top of yogurt, some blueberries, some chia, some honey.
Would you mind identifying number 7? What is number 7?
Number 7 is kombucha. Thank you for that question. Sorry about that. Thank you very much. Kombucha is kombucha. All right, you ready to delve in here? Here we go. All right, so what is the microbiome? Probably have heard of this term. I've also heard microbiota, and it took some delving to figure out what the difference was there. So the microbiome is the collection of bacteria, fungi, viruses, and their genomes that coexist within us, and also the metabolites, so the products of their metabolism that they create for us. The microbiota, ending in TA, is the little microbes themselves. So I have this bottle of kombucha. If you see on a bottle like this or on yogurt, it says 9 billion living probiotics. Those are the actual microbiome, the little microbes that live in your gut. We actually have microbes on our skin as well. So if you think of the gut and the skin, that is actually the outside facing part of your body, believe it or not. So if you think about the lining of your gut being from your mouth, your oral cavity, all the way through to the other end, everything we eat and breathe comes in contact with that gut, with that lining. So your skin is a natural barrier, as is your gut and your intestines. The gut microbiome lines our digestive tract and acts as a barrier to sort out exposures from the environment, everything we eat and drink. It also helps us extract nutrients from our diet. Frankly, I didn't know this, but we don't have every enzyme necessary to break down the foods we eat. I vaguely knew that about, lettuce, that we can't fully digest lettuce, and that's why there's not a big calorie cost there. But there are other foods too that we don't naturally possess the enzymes to break down, and that's where our microbe friends help us out. They have jobs to do. They help us extract micronutrients from our food. So that is a symbiotic relationship that we have with them. They ferment the foods that we can't break down, allowing us to get micronutrients like selenium, zinc, and iron out of the food we eat. It also helps us make vitamins like B12 and K. There are 500 to 1,000 different microbe species within us. And remember this, more diversity is better. More is better. So the more we have more microbes in us than we do actually have cells in our body. And the goal here is to keep that gut and skin barrier really healthy so it can be an effective gatekeeper for us. Here's where it gets, I warned you, gets a little bit dense here. You're going to be seeing slides like this and also references at the bottom. This reference at the bottom right that I'm showing you is probably the single most incredible reference that you could spend several hours reading through if you're curious about this. This one reference will take you through a great detail about your endocrine, immune, and nervous systems and how they interact with your gut health. I've actually interacted with Dr. Flux as I've written several articles on this topic. He's an incredible researcher and a wonderful resource, and clearly is as fascinated by this as I am, and has done a great deal of work to support our knowledge in this area. So that one reference, if you're looking for a good one to delve deeper, I can't recommend highly enough. And I loved his rather poetic approach to it. If you look at the title, it says Finding Intestinal Fortitude. That just got me from the beginning. Any scientist that has a bit of artist in them is somebody really worth paying attention to, I think. So the takeaway message here from this slide is that there are bidirectional feedback loops that really matter, and they really do affect your mental health. And with all of the conversation around the state of mental health at all ages, from our youth through adults, this could not be a more important topic for coaches to be aware of. At least that was my bias coming into this. So our microbiome is influenced by the first years of life and responds to environmental factors, what we put into our bodies each day. These exposures include medications, such as antibiotics, which actually kill off friendly bacteria. This is one of the reasons, although it's not the usual reason given, for us to be cautious about using antibiotics, and particularly in the first 2 years of life. Antibiotics do kill off friendly and unfriendly microbes, but the advantage of starting with a healthy microbiota in the first place is that you can rebound more quickly. So having enough numbers of microbes and enough diversity within your gut is a great starting point. Just like if you're sick, if you were already fit, already had a good lung capacity before you get a respiratory infection, that sets you up for a better prognosis going through the respiratory infection. You just have a bit more reserve in you. So an article in Molecular Psychiatry published in 2022 was interesting. It is now widely accepted that the gut exerts considerable influence on human neurophysiology and mental health. It's now widely accepted in 2022. This wasn't always the case, but we are in a place now where we can say that with some conviction. This new understanding of the relationship between gut health and mental health is causing researchers to really pivot. They now want to understand how nutrition can influence the human experience. One of the important neurotransmitters affected by depression is cortisol. You may know of that as the stress hormone. That's at the left side of this slide. We'll come back to that in a moment. And you'll also see cytokines on the left side of this slide. I'm very nervous here, but I did practice annotating, so I'm going to try it. Let's see if I can do this. So over here is cytokines. You can see me circling it. And cortisol is mentioned over here. Close this up. Oops. Okay, we're at checkpoint 1, folks. So where is the microbiome? You don't have to write down long answers, but just reflect on it for a moment and think about how you would use this term. You can easily focus on it being a collection of microbes. And in this case, the DNA, so their genome and their metabolites. Metabolites are the byproducts of metabolism. Who are all of these little critters? It's viruses, bacteria, and fungi. And they have evolved with us symbiotically. And what is the job? They actually digest fibers that we don't have the enzymes to digest ourselves. They help us extract nutrients, fight off disease, and manufacture neurotransmitters. These 4 things might be worth jotting down. Digestion of fibers that we don't have enzymes for, extracting nutrients, fighting off disease, and manufacturing neurotransmitters. So depression is a complex interaction between the nervous, immune, and endocrine systems. This is a nerve cell I put up here on this picture. I thought it was beautiful. So the National Center for Health Statistics and the US Census Bureau conducted a survey during the pandemic, and they found they just took a pulse of the American public by age, and they looked at anxiety and depression during the pandemic. And the numbers are trending down, thankfully, but only slightly. So among those 18 to 29 years of age, symptoms of anxiety were reported by 51.7% of people in fall of 2020. Still, 1 in 3 young adults and 1 in 4 people 30 to 49 are affected by depression. And those are current statistics. So what can gut health do to modify depression and anxiety? Well, I just mentioned cortisol on the previous slide. It is one hormone that has a vast array of influences on metabolism and the immune response. It is a fight or flight steroid hormone. So you've heard of that. It's the stress hormone. That fight or flight steroid hormone increases blood pressure, heart rate, muscle tension, and manages the motility of your digestive system. Motility means how quick stuff is running through. So it either brings it to a halt or spurs it to be more active. So if you can imagine in a fight scenario, it's really helpful to not need to run to the bathroom, right? So that's why all of these things work together. It's also why blood vessels constrict to pull blood back to the core of your body to keep you alive if you have a limb cut off. It's a little gory, but these are the natural systems that have evolved to keep us alive during very, very stressful times. So the cortisol also increases sugar in your bloodstream. It enhances your brain's ability to use glucose, which it needs to think, and it boosts your tissue repair capacity, also very useful. The reproductive system is also affected, as are brain regions connected with mood, motivation, and fear. All very helpful in an emergency situation, but turning that cortisol hormone on all the time is frankly like driving with the emergency brake on. You get really worn down. So just think about your body and all of its striving. All of these systems turned on, amped all the time, rushing from place to place and feeling constantly stressed. You can imagine the toll that it takes on your body. So learning to react to these stressors with healthier thoughts and behaviors, because you might already be managing as well as you can with just, some good mind work, can really help us to avoid spiraling into anxiety, depression, and sleep problems, weight gain, poor concentration, headaches, muscle tension, and pain. So by putting the right fuel in our guts, gives us a moment to take pause and reflect and take stock of how we're treating these amazing bodies, but it also helps optimize all of these feedback loops. And it can begin to shift our sense of control to be more internalized than externalized. That's a really important concept for us to begin functioning optimally, not just surviving our days. Another amazing slide with lots of arrows. I hope you're enjoying these. So the little squiggly up and down serpentine, that's your gut lining. It has, it's constructed this way, so it has lots of surface area. The surface area of your gut, I don't know if you want to take a guess at how many thousand square feet it might be. You can throw it in the chat if you want. What do you think is the surface area of your gut? I can't really see the chat because I've got my screen taken out, but Stephanie might enjoy seeing what you think.
Yeah, let me see if I can.
Okay, I won't give away. Yeah.
I see
Any
8
guesses out there?
miles. Yeah, I see 8 miles is an answer from someone. I won't call the person out if they don't want to. But that was the only response so far, 8
Okay.
miles.
It may well be 8 miles long. I don't know that offhand. The surface area in square footage that I found was 4,000 square feet. So a massive mansion in there. So that surface area is important because it allows us to absorb food and micronutrients. But how did this gut-brain link begin to be uncovered? Well, there's a long history here of kind of anecdotal reports and questions about psychiatric side effects following antibiotics, even in people without any history of a psychiatric condition. And in the early part of the 20th century, lactobacillus strains were marketed to improve mental health conditions, but they fell out of favor. And then in 2015, a researcher found that a single antibiotic course was associated with an increased risk for depression and anxiety, and that rose with multiple exposures. So that prompted a lot of questions, as you might imagine. More research began to accumulate, mostly in animal models. In human research studies, alcohol, smoking, and sleep habits were found to have an effect on the gut microbiome. So from there, the microbiota, remember the little microbes themselves, soon became the focus of the critical link between our physical makeup and our psychology. When the gut motility is disturbed, that's called dysbiosis, D-Y-S-B-I-O-S-I-S. Dysbiosis could be a sign of other wide-ranging disorders, potentially affecting our central nervous system. And that relationship is only becoming understood more closely right now. Everything is really still in animal models. We're not at a point where we can sample your microbiome and then tweak it just a little bit to affect a depression diagnosis. We're not at that state at all yet. But we're beginning to understand how exactly the feedback channels work that you see on your left. So there are multiple connections that form the signaling pathway, and I want to draw your attention to a couple of them that you'll hear frequently. One is the vagus nerve. And over here on the left, you'll find that in neural communication, vagal and sympathetic. So the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems are the ones that do the fight or flight response. Turns you on to fight, ramps you back down coming off of that tense interaction. So the vagal nerve is a key player there. That vagal nerve is the longest autonomic nerve in the body, and it works with the parasympathetic system to control the heart, the lungs, and the digestive tract. And there's preliminary evidence that gut bacteria have a beneficial effect on mood and anxiety by affecting the activity of that nerve, which sends information to the brain about the state of our internal organs. When we have dysbiosis, those pathways get disturbed. They get dysregulated. That dysregulation can make the normally tight junction between the cells down here in the little serpentine area. See how tightly they are connected to each other? The junction between all of those little cells, I hope you can see my cursor down here, can become looser. You might have heard of leaky gut. When the junctions between those cells get looser, things from inside the microbiome slip out into the rest of your system, into places where they don't belong. And guess what is on patrol looking for things that don't belong? The immune system. Your immune system is on constant patrol, the T cells looking for things that don't belong there, antibodies, to shut down an infection. But if you have a leaky gut and things are leaking out all the time, that's got your immune system then constantly ramped on, looking for trouble. The process of that leakiness is referred to as inflammation. And when it involves the nervous system as well, that's called neuroinflammation. So while we don't really understand the precise mechanism of neuroinflammation, it's called the inflammasome pathway. Inflammasomes are substances that are created when we're exposed to microbes, when we're exposed to danger signals and stress. They are pro-inflammatory molecules. Cytokines, which I mentioned before, also involved. You might have heard of the cytokine storm during COVID, that cytokine storm was harmful to some people and caused them to become very sick. Everything in your body is a delicate balancing act. So those first responders are really important to shutting down infection without any prior training. Antibodies need prior training, but these cytokines don't really need any prior training. They just need to know it doesn't belong. But having them turned on all the time due to stress or a poor diet can cause harm. Hope you're staying with me. We'll get through this, I promise. So taking a deeper dive into that gut, see all these little cells here? And then do you see the green here? And then the layers above the little cells? And then down in the at the bottom left of the screen, you'll see dietary tryptophan. Pay attention to tryptophan, 5-HT, and the brain. That will become relevant in just a second. So the signaling pathways, this is the takeaway for this slide, between the gut and the brain. Use again that vagal nerve, which you see up here. These special cells down here, the green cell here, there's some fancy names for these. Enteroendocrine, you don't need to remember that. And enterochromaffin. EEC and ECC cells, as well as your gut mucosal cells, are really responsible for the signaling. So these are, all you need to remember is that these are special cells buried in your gut lining that help convert tryptophan into 5-HT, which then becomes serotonin. You probably know about serotonin because of selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Your gut actually makes 90% of the 5-HT, and specifically it's made by these special ECC cells. So if you just picture that there's special cells within your gut lining that are cranking out 5-HT for your brain, that's the real takeaway here. The other interesting takeaway here relates to some of these metabolites I've been mentioning. So this sounds like a mouthful again, but there are short chain fatty acids. So when you're reading more on this, if you see the acronym SCFA, short chain fatty acids, you might see that thrown around a lot. There's one other you might see thrown around, 2BA. I'm always annoyed when I see acronyms. It's like everybody in the in crowd knows what it is and I don't, and then I have to go search for it. So 2BA is another one you might see in this literature. Secondary bile acids. Don't get too distracted by the technical terms here. These are metabolites. These are things that the gut is digesting and releasing for us to use. So these metabolites are the products of our gut microbes. They travel to the brain via the vagal nerves. When our diet is low in the fibers from our food that these microbes need to break down, then they don't get to make us as much as CFA or 2BA. So if we don't feed our gut the right food, the little microbes living in your gut can't do their job. They don't get the kind of food that they need too. Remember, they help us break down food. So there's some things that we eat that we can't break down, that is their food. So if we're not giving them, just for instance, a green apple, then they don't have the food that they need to survive and thrive, which then affects us. So the more bad food that we eat, we actually don't feel like we're filling up because the metabolites are what cause us to feel full. So if we don't feed our gut the right food, then these little microbes can't send our brain the signal that we're filling up. We think we're so hungry. That's why we just keep chomping down on the bad food, because we're eating bad food and we don't feel full. Do you see the vicious feedback loop there? If we eat good food, then the microbes get to eat, and then they send the signals of satiety, of being satiated to our brain. It's really phenomenal. It's amazing.
Hey, Allie, I
Yeah.
know that we would take questions in the end, but I think there's one that's directly towards what you're talking about now.
Let's go for it.
Elaine asks, do exocannabinoids figure in here in this lining?
I would like to answer that later. I don't have the answer for that right now. It sounds like you went deeper than me. So I would love to answer that later if that would be possible. Thank you for that question.
That was me, Ally, asking that question. It's cannabinoids as in cannabis.
Yes, cannabinoids.
Yeah.
Cannabinoids
So-
are definitely part of the picture, and I bring that up later. I'm sorry, I
Okay.
just didn't understand which word you were referring to, but cannabinoids are made in the brain, and they are made, at least from what I've learned so far, in response to actually intense exercise. And so 20 to 30 minutes of intense exercise, not really walking, but more so running. And so, yes, definitely. Deeper than that, I'm not prepared to speak to just yet, but I am curious about this myself. About the role of endogenous cannabinoids, absolutely. There's a podcast that I love that does talk about this, Huberman Lab, if you're curious to delve in more.
I am, thank you.
Huberman Lab, he's a neurobiologist.
Okay, would you spell that real quick?
Yeah, Huberman.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for that. Okay, I'm being mindful of time, and we do want to be able to take questions. So let's see if I can get through the meat of this. Slide 16. Okay, perfect. Here we are at checkpoint 2. That was a great time for a question. So how common is depression? And what body systems are impacted? The nervous, immune, and endocrine. And then the gut-brain axis. So bidirectional pathway between the gut and the nervous system. Okay, I moved right into Stephanie and my frankly favorite topic. We had a lot of fun in our initial conversation on this topic, and just a warning, Stephanie and I have absolutely zero issue talking about the products of our intestinal process, because we think it should be normalized, and it tells us a lot about what's going on inside. And this is, frankly, everyone will tell you, one of my favorite topics. So without further ado, Stephanie, what were your observations here?
So I had just returned from a trip from Israel, and I was talking to Allie about my digestive system as she and I were practicing for this presentation. And one of the things that I discovered, and I'm actually eating it this morning, is this probiotic. And as a result of my health conditions, I don't mind being transparent. I'm diabetic. I lead a very stressful life. I probably have a little anxiety in there. My sleep hygiene is very good. I'm very mindful and self-aware about my health and my digestive system. I use a diabetes pen, which causes me to be constipated. And so that's why I utilize these probiotics. But anyway, the conversation that Allie and I were talking about is, when I travel, I ended up not having good bowel, like probably type 1 and 2 in that picture. And so I have to be mindful. I don't have to use a $5.99 product. I can do things like Activia. I eat chia pudding. I make my own homemade chia pudding, which is basically 4 ingredients, which is like almond milk, Greek yogurt, the chia seeds, and a little maybe vanilla extract and honey, something like that. Which one of those are probiotics in those ingredients, Allie?
Well, we actually have a slide for this later in the
Oh.
presentation. Yeah, with your recipe on it. So I'll save it for that.
Okay. But anyway, that's the conversation that we had. And so I think it's important to bring these type of things up with our clients, because if they're like me, we're running around, with lipstick on and nice, pretty eyebrows, and we're constipated and stressed out. And because all of these things work together, it's okay to ask, how's your digestive system? And Allie and I'll do some coaching demo on that in a few minutes. All right. So that's
Thank you so much. Stephanie, thank you so much for that. Yeah, we really bonded over the probiotics, and Stephanie brought some to my attention that I had never heard of. So we've got some pictures and some recipes for super busy people to use in the morning to keep you not only moving, but also really promote brain health and staying full and satiated for a while. I really rely strongly on my normal breakfast routine to keep my brain going through the entire morning and feeling full for a long time. So this is a great time to also mention the importance of hydration. You've heard about the importance of staying hydrated, but frankly, what's happening in your intestinal tract is water is being reabsorbed from the fecal matter. And having type 1 or type 2 is potentially a sign also that you're dehydrated, because your body is reabsorbing water back out, which means drier, harder to get out. So really important to remember the importance of hydration. And if you can, try not to drink sugary sodas and fruit beverages, because they generally don't have the fiber that you want from the actual fruit. Remember, I mentioned that the microbes need fiber too. So the actual fruit gives you that fiber. So looking at other options, I've actually gotten into kombucha because that does contain probiotics. So it's a great way to have something other than water, and also do something good for my gut health as well. So I consulted with my dietitian friend. Her name is Amy Ogle, and I'll give you her contact information at the end of the slide deck, but she is a phenomenal exercise sports nutritionist with expertise in reproductive health, preconception nutrition, and looking at the role of the male too here, not just the female. And she wanted me to be sure and mention that if you're thinking about a clean start and doing a cleanse, it's, she says, unnecessary and downright harmful, to use her words. So just be mindful of that. So staying hydrated is good, but a cleanse is not necessary. And also important to note that as you begin introducing pre and probiotics more into your diet, you may need a little bit of time. You may notice that it has an impact on you a little bit more so than you might expect. And as things get really moving, you might notice a little bit more gas and things like that. So you might think about introducing things not all at once, like I tend to do, but just gradually. And of course, continue, if you're making any major changes to your diet and you have other health conditions going on, it would be wise to check with your doctor too. So gut-brain interactions here. I mentioned tryptophan in a previous slide down at the bottom left, those tiny little pill-shaped things. Tryptophan is a precursor and important for us to keep in mind. So the gut-brain axis is driven by, I mentioned, inflammatory pathways. But why is inflammation important to managing mood? The cytokines, those first responders that I mentioned, when they ramp up, they can cause leaky gut. And that in turn allows antigens to travel around. So things that don't belong to travel around in places in the body where they should not be found. Then that ramps up the immune system to go and attack those antigens and could potentially lead to autoimmune conditions. So just to wrap up a few important points here on the role of the gut-brain axis and local and systemic immunity. When you eat tryptophan, that is an essential diet-derived amino acid. We can't make it within our body ourselves. So when you actually eat it in a complete protein, such as milk or eggs, your gut allows tryptophan to cross the blood-brain barrier and participate in serotonin synthesis. So remember, I said it's an important part of that pathway to make serotonin. The short-chain fatty acids that I mentioned before are produced by the fermentation process in your gut. They are also important metabolites which interact with nerve cells, and they stimulate that sympathetic and that autonomic, which regulates your breathing and your heart rate, nervous system. That also crosses the blood-brain barrier. And then finally, remember that the gut provides 90% of your body's 5-HT, and that is significantly linked to psychiatric disorders. So having too much or too little, and that's what the antidepressants regulate. So if you're still not really convinced about the role of the gut-brain axis, good question. How do we really know that it is important, and how much experimentation has been done to figure out the precise mechanisms of action? That would be a good question for a scientist. Frankly, what my husband asked me in the kitchen when I was getting all excited about this. So fecal transplants of depression-related microbiota into healthy mice developed depression-like behaviors. 2 papers confirmed a bidirectional pathway. changes in the microbiota, meaning the microbes themselves, did affect behavior in animal models, and changes in behavior caused by chronic stress, genetics and medication did cause changes in the microbiota. So it did seem to go both ways in an animal model. So looking into this signaling pathway from bottom up, how does it work? Well, there's two barriers to keep in mind. The mucosal barrier, which I alluded to earlier. That's the lining of your gut. It has an outer layer that's thicker and looser, and then an inner layer that's firmly attached to the cells. The outer layer contains the microbes. These are the important microbes that digest the prebiotics. These are the things that we cannot digest ourselves, and they are the food for the probiotics. If we do not eat enough of these prebiotics, and I'll give you examples of those in just a little bit, then the microbes digest the glycoproteins in the biofilm. They digest what we don't want them to eat because they do need some food. And that again opens the door to pathogens leaking out of our gut, leading to inflammation and autoimmunity. So the two mucosal barriers are the mucosal barrier lining the gut from your mouth all the way through, and then your blood-brain barrier. And again, this is a slide you saw earlier with tryptophan down here, being an important precursor of 5-HT, and that being the serotonin production pathway that occurs in your brain. And then the second barrier I mentioned is the blood-brain barrier. These microbes are very important in this feedback loop, upregulating production of important neurotransmitters. And we now have 40 years of research showing that this stress in the gut and microbiome composition really matters. We just have not really been able to fully explore exactly how this bidirectional pathway works. And then the next phase will be, what can we do as far as treatment modalities? That's why I say we're at the frontier of understanding how to actually make changes in individual health based on this knowledge. Okay, we're at checkpoint 3. What is gut dysbiosis? It's a change in the diversity of the gut microbiota. Remember, taking antibiotics can kill off both harmful and friendly bacteria. Leaky gut is caused when the natural protective mucosa is weakened, allowing the pathogens to leak out. And that then turns on the immune system. Gut dysbiosis can also co-occur with these other conditions: autism spectrum, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, depression, and anxiety. Now, this is important. We're not saying that this is causal. We can't say that there's a causal relationship. What we're beginning to understand is correlation and trying to delve into why that is. Why do we see that gut dysbiosis co-occurs with these conditions? And then that, if we understand that, then we might have some insight into how to support health. So understanding major depression and the microbiome encompasses the same framework that I've just presented. So this upregulated cortisol response, increased concentrations of cytokines. This slide is a summary of this whole process. The gut permeability and shuttling of bacteria where they don't belong. That in turn upregulating your immune system, inflammatory status, cytokine levels, that tryptophan, 5-HT, and serotonin production pathway, leading to neurotrophins and brain plasticity. So I hope it's becoming clear that there really is a link here. Now, something that you may not have considered is, where does this all start? So a mother's microbiome is the dominant influence, beginning even prior to conception and through pregnancy and lactation on an infant's microbiome. So the mother's microbiome is key. The mode of delivery was once thought to be the really dominant influence, but it turns out that the infant's microbiome is really more shaped by what happens before and during pregnancy. The lactation diet, meaning during breastfeeding, physical activity by the mother, also affects breast milk. And that influences the infant microbiome. And as I mentioned to you, my friend Amy is also interested in the health of the father. He's not a completely passive bystander. After the baby is born, the household exposures also become an important influence. And I looked into a study that was conducted in Ireland during the lockdown, which actually found that children who were born during the lockdown, so they had much fewer exposures, had a tendency to have more allergies. I thought that was fascinating. But what was protective was having pets, siblings, a plant-rich diet, breastfeeding, and living in a household with adults or in rural areas. These were all protective. And so the take home there is diversity is good. Very often we're very, very focused on limiting exposures. I know I felt that way coming out of the pandemic as an epidemiologist, and very health conscious and very symptom oriented and very aware of every little symptom that I had. I kind of wanted to shrink away from the world and protect myself from exposures. But to be honest, the more I understand my immune system and the very resilient nature of it, the more I developed confidence and the knowledge that diversity is better. Diversity of exposures can be protective and is. Each pregnancy trimester has its own characteristics. So the first is more inflammatory, the second is lesser inflammatory, and the third is back to more inflammatory. And you can imagine going into labor is a massive inflammatory response to launch the baby into the world. So this information is not to imply that, difficult times during pregnancy is going to set up an infant for a difficult time in life. There are normal stressors that we all go through, but optimizing what you eat and setting yourself up to have a very health promoting womb means you're paying attention to what you eat. This is meant to empower people to understand just how important the early exposures are. So what can we do? So eating a high-fat diet during pregnancy is associated with behavioral disorders via the immune, metabolic, and neuroendocrine systems. Creating a pro-inflammatory state in the womb might contribute through elevated cytokines to the production of inflammatory bacterial metabolites. So being mindful of these pathways and eating intentionally can help us reduce these harmful substances and promote a more optimal environment for infants. The gut microbiome is involved because it influences placental function, and it moderates the exposures of the baby to these harmful compounds. So it's a very complex set of interactions. It's difficult to disentangle, but again, the takeaway is a good diet for mom is good for baby.
Hey, Allie,
Yeah,
can I interrupt for a second?
yes, please.
All right. When you all get a moment, I have uploaded the certificate to the chat. I take that you all will finish the whole hour and a half to earn the CEUs. Can you please put your name and full email address in the chat? If you are struggling to download the certificate, let me know. And there was one person in here, I can't see her full name. Her name is Vicky. Vicky, I specifically need your full name. Thank you, everybody. Continue on.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for that reminder and I think we're doing well on the time, actually, everybody. So not to worry. This is the last major push here, and just introducing the word psychobiotics, which you might be hearing more about. I was, again, a little skeptical, and that's why I put the article from Forbes up there along with the link for you. So what are they? What are psychobiotics? They are foods that stimulate the production of important metabolites, which we've already discussed, those SCFAs, short chain fatty acids. They are neuroprotective, meaning they're good for your brain, and they have cognitive and antidepressant effects. So recall that gut bacteria metabolize the non-digestible fiber to produce neurotransmitters like dopamine and norepinephrine from lactobacilli. Serotonin comes from enterococci and streptococci. Norepinephrine and serotonin from E. coli. These are the specific bacterial players that are helpful, and acetylcholine from lactobacilli. So it was found that specific strains of lactobacillus can induce expression of opioid receptors and cannabinoids. This is what we were talking about earlier, and that can have a pain suppressing effect similar to morphine. So the key point here, prebiotics are considered psychobiotics because they have an effect on the neuroendocrine system. That's why we put psycho in front of their psychobiotics. Prebiotics are considered psychobiotics for that reason. The changes are again thought to occur via the vagal nerve and cytokine production. And then the one thing I wanted to go over here a little bit more specifically is the importance of 5-HT, because you may see this pop up a lot, and serotonin is something that is discussed frequently. So 5-HT helps regulate many functions that we take for granted, from motor and secretory reflexes, clotting, blood clotting, immune responses, bone development, and cardiac function. Having 5-HT go off balance, be dysregulated, has been noted in the onset of diseases such as irritable bowel syndrome, cardiovascular diseases, and osteoporosis. So what activity can induce cannabinoid production? I alluded to this earlier. And then a psychobiotic. I've mentioned the green apple, and we're going to provide you several examples in the coming slides. Stephanie mentioned she likes chia pudding. And then this last one, what neuroactive compound is made mostly by the gut? 90%. Everybody all together, 5-HT. So just to summarize, I thought this slide was a really good example of how this all works together. And it has a nice visual there for the cells on the right and that tight junction between the cells that we really want to see. So bring it all together. Our intestines contain trillions of bacteria, viruses, fungi, and single-celled archaea. These are our probiotics. The bacteria help us digest our food, and eating healthy prebiotics feeds the probiotics, who are the microbes in our intestines. And frankly, I like to think of them as my little pets or my little friends, because it's very easy to feed my pets. I never miss feeding the fish, no matter how busy I am. I try to feed them in the morning before I go and feed myself. So if it helps you to anthropomorphize a little bit, feel free. And then secondly, the microbes break down foods into metabolites, the short chain fatty acids and the secondary bile acids, which communicate with our central nervous system and our immune system. So taking antibiotics and killing off our friendly bacteria, or eating too few prebiotics and probiotics, can disturb the diversity of our gut microbiome. And remember, diversity is good here. Having a healthy and diverse gut microbiome protects the lining of our gut. It reduces inflammation. It keeps those cells bound tightly together, increases secretion of important metabolites that are the precursors to many important neurotransmitters that I just mentioned: serotonin, norepinephrine, acetylcholine, GABA, dopamine. Okay, here's a chance to go over specific prebiotics and probiotics that you might want to just grab and start introducing in your diet more so if you aren't already. Stephanie really enjoyed chatting about this with me because she realized she was already doing quite a bit of good in her diet. And that's very reinforcing. So prebiotics, check which numbers you put up against this. You might also see symbiotics mentioned. That simply means both. Kimchi, it's a symbiotic. I like natto. Few people here in the US really know what natto is. You might have heard of natto kinase, but natto is fermented soybean. We lived in Japan for 4 years with the military, and my son and I got into natto, and quite by accident, actually. But then when people were shocked that the foreigners liked natto, that became, kind of self-propelling. We enjoyed trying to encourage the younger Japanese kids he played hockey, my son played hockey there. And we noticed that not all the young Japanese kids ate natto. So we wanted to keep that cultural heritage going and encourage it because it is so healthy. Okay, in the interest of time, I think we're doing pretty good, Stephanie. I'm pretty impressed, like frankly shocked that we're doing okay. There's a lot to get through here. So you're on mute, Stephanie, but we were talking about how do we take all this and bring it into coaching? And this is where I needed a real expert. Hey,
Okay.
Stephanie.
So Allie's going to be my client. And I'm also going to ask that you put your coaching questions that you would ask a client in the chat also, so that we have an abundance of questions that can be asked with regard to wellness. And so, Allie, I know in some previous coaching sessions, you've talked to me about your sleep hygiene and your stress levels in terms of everything that you have going on. I know that you just got back from Greece. How would you describe your wellness right about now?
Well, let's see, my wellness, I'm jet lagged, I'm a little tired, and I noticed that I'm not quite as regular, if you know what I mean, as I would like to be. I just feel a little out of whack.
Okay. And what do you think is the best course of action to try to get back to your regular self?
Well, I do try to eat a lot of salads, but it's kind of odd, like that doesn't seem to be enough. So I noticed that because I'm tired in the afternoon, I'm making a beeline for my Cheez-Its. I'm also thinking maybe that might not be such a great idea. There's probably something I could substitute that might be more helpful. That's it. Do you have any other ideas for me?
Well, I hear you just talked about your digestive system. Didn't you just mention your digestive system?
Yeah, things are not moving quite like they should.
Oh, okay. It's my understanding that that's related to, or I shouldn't use the word related, but there's a correlation between, your sleep, your stress, and your gut, that they're all interconnected. What do you normally do when your digestive system is not functioning properly?
Well, I think a go-to would be more water. I have heard that talked about a lot, more hydration. So I could be thinking about that. I have been lately hearing more about the microbiome, but I'm not really sure what that's all about. But if there was anything to get me more interested in eating properly, like something other than just eat your vegetables, I'd be game to hear all about that.
Oh, okay. You use the word microbiome. I've heard it used in other contexts. What do you know about that?
Not too much, but now that you mention it, I am curious. I'm kind of a skeptic, so I'd be curious to know if there's really anything to it. And certainly I do live a pretty wild life, and I would love, one of the reasons I've hired a coach is to be, high functioning, high performance, not just surviving. So I suppose now that I hear myself talk this through, it would make sense for me to check into the microbiome, gut health, and who knows where that will lead.
Okay. And so what does it mean to check into it? What are you going to do to make that happen?
This is why I love my coach. She's always asking specific steps. This is why I hired you. So specific step, well, Google's my friend. There's also now ChatGPT. When I don't have time to summarize a vast, area of science, from what I've heard, using AI can actually give us, a pretty good summary of where things are. So that might be a reasonable place to start. And I could also maybe look for some presentations. Maybe some people are speaking on it, maybe a podcast, because I'm super busy. Maybe while I'm folding laundry and matching socks, I could be listening to something. How many action items was that, Stephanie? Was that good?
Yeah, that was good. Can I insert some personal insights? Do you mind if I do that?
Oh, I'd love to hear.
Yeah. So you mentioned AI and Chat GPT and all of those great things for doing your homework. And I commend you for that. And I think those are great action items going forward. I do suggest that you also talk to your physician before starting any kind of a program or changing your diet in any way as you're out there doing your research. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a good idea because, it's hard to know what people are already doing for supplements, maybe. So that's good advice in general. I'm not on any medications, but I think that's great advice. I should be thinking about that and, maybe just getting a kind of checkup. Wouldn't that be smart of me to go and kind of see how all systems are doing? I hadn't thought of that. Thank you, Stephanie.
Okay. So what's your takeaway from this?
I think takeaway is it's probably good to see where I am as far as, routine screenings that I might have missed because I've been living such a frenetic life, traveling for work now that things have opened up. So visit doctor, check on what's overdue, do some research on this gut situation, like through some podcasts, I think I mentioned, more hydration, and see if I can find a more interesting food to eat that's not just more salad.
Okay. And on a scale from 1 to 10, you named a lot of stuff. How committed are you to doing all those things?
Not so committed to the doctor, but I'll put it there. I'll at least pick up the phone and make the appointment because I know it's coming, probably something horrible like a colonoscopy, but I'll do it. And the others I think are pretty easy to do. So I would rate that a 10.
Okay. Well, great, Allie. I'm excited. Actually, we started out talking about going back to talking about your sleep and your stress levels and travel. And I think some great things have come out of this in terms of overall wellness, especially those checkups that you need. You talked about a colonoscopy and things like that. So I commend you on identifying that and knowing the importance of that in your overall wellness and health. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for, being well informed enough to be willing to kind of go there with me and talk about actual health and, concrete steps that I can make to take care of myself. I really appreciate that. That's not what I expected in a coach, and just speaks to your breadth of knowledge and interest in my overall well-being. So thank you for that.
Okay. So I'm taking that hat off and
very good. We're back. Thank you so much for that demo, Stephanie. I really appreciate that. And our goal there, folks, was to, it can be uncomfortable to start talking with people, but in preparing this presentation, we paid attention to words that did feel opening and did feel welcoming when we were swapping coaching on this ourselves, and talking about wellness did seem to open the door to overall wellness, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and what that could look like. So if you noticed any prompts that you thought were good, jot them down in the chat. If you picked up on anything that might have been better, we're all ears and would love to hear that too. You can throw them in the chat and share them with each other. And also, when we're talking to clients, listening for blocks which prevent the client from paying attention to the body's messages and how the person is actually feeling. We started out this journey talking about the importance of understanding how systems interact, and we pay a lot of attention as coaches to communication between people in families, in workplaces. I think if there's anything that I hope we've inspired you to consider, it's the communication that's happening all the time, second to second within your own body at a cellular level, and just how much that affects your overall mental and physical health. So thank you very much for your attention to that. Stephanie, would you like to share the chia pudding recipe and how you implement that into your busy day?
Absolutely. I try to do food prep on Sunday. And so one of the things that I'll do is make chia pudding on a Sunday. It's normally good for about 3 days. There's the ingredients there on the left, but I'll put it in a mason jar. I shake it up, stick it in the refrigerator, and then I'll throw it in my lunchbox at 5 a.m. in the morning when I'm going to the office, or if I'm teleworking here at home, I just grab one. And I like to put granola on top of it to make it taste good and that sort of thing. I'll also put it into my smoothies along with flaxseed in my smoothies. So I try to find ways to sprinkle in some of the healthy goodness. And this is expensive, but I'll try to eat one of these maybe once a week or every 2 weeks, once every 2 weeks, something I can stick in my lunchbox and run with it. I don't have to really give it too much thought and don't have to prepare anything. Somebody put something in the comments. It says, be careful when you ask someone, how well do you eat? And then you get the answer, I eat really well. It's important for me to follow up with another question. Okay. And more specifics. I think I read all of that. Yeah, I'm a good person for lying about my diet. I eat pretty well most of the time, but then, there's the moments where I'm eating a whole bag of Twizzlers. So
yeah, and we on that note, we did take some time to think about coaching prompts that would help us avoid that pitfall of the person saying, oh yeah, I eat totally great. Like Stephanie suggested, how do you start your day? How do you end your day? And that would get the client maybe to share some of, their typical routines at night. And then paying attention to those signals in the body when you eat, maybe like me, too many Cheez-Its or Cheetos, or how did you actually feel when you switched to an apple afterwards? For me personally, knowing that green apples have the most prebiotic content power in that skin, the green apple skin. I didn't like green apples before, they were too sour, but when I found out that they were like the super prebiotic, I was sold. I put the prebiotic green apple in my path toward the Cheez-Its. So I had to walk by it to get to the Cheez-Its. I haven't eaten Cheez-Its since because that green apple is looking at me. So that's my 3 p.m. whatever pick me up. And then on the right here, we just had this, our family, just over the weekend. And got to tell you, it was actually really good and super easy. So you can buy those pre-made frozen fruit smoothie packets that you can see in the background there. And add some milk and some flaxseed. And we do keep that refrigerated. Also keep your chia seeds refrigerated for maximum freshness. And then these are some Stephanie finds. She went to the market and took pictures for you. Tell us about these, Stephanie.
Yeah, I found these at Fresh Market. I normally go in there every Sunday and pick up a couple of items. It's pretty expensive. And you can get more inexpensive things like at your regular everyday grocery store. But these are some items that I'll go in and I'll just grab something and I'll try it and see if I like it. And then that gives me a clue that I'll go back for it. So that's how I got here. And Steph is saying she loves Bulgarian yogurt. Okay.
Very cool. And yeah, you just brought up something good about trying things. These are suggestions from my nutritionist dietitian friend, Amy Ogle. So she says, commit to trying something, but you don't have to buy a whole ton of it. Just buy a little bit, high quality foods. You can also grate and chop veggies into really small pieces and get them into a marinara sauce. If you put a dab of miso in it, remember that is a probiotic, and you can disguise it in sandwiches. She also puts spinach in kefir and berry smoothies. I'm really guilty of disguising things in smoothies that my children say are disgusting, but they can't really taste it. I also have a theory that the the greener or the browner your drink is or your smoothie, no one will steal it. So it's a way to keep my good stuff to myself. All right, that brings us to question time. We didn't leave you too much time for questions, but we would love to entertain any that you have. And I will also see if I can open up chat here and put my email in here so that I can answer any. Yeah, it looks like I can. This is really, frankly, guys, my first time being on this side of a presentation. I've been an attendee so often. Here it comes. We're just delighted to have you here. So please fire away the questions. If you want to raise your hand or jump on live, we'd love to see your little face.
Hey, Allie, while they're coming on, someone asked the question, can you leave on the screen that shows different foods that were categorized as pre-pro and psychobiotics?
Yeah, certainly we can do that.
Okay, and then I see Lisa's hand. Go ahead, Lisa.
But thank you for this presentation. It's really good. I appreciate it very much. I was interested in the cytokine. I think that's the word, or is it cytokine?
Cytokine, yeah.
Cytokine. So that in particular, I have an autoimmune condition that developed from stress during the pandemic, called alopecia universalis. So all my hair fell out, and I'm going to try a new FDA approved drug that is called a JAK inhibitor, and it interacts with cytokine production, like it tamps it down. So I'd like to understand a little bit more about cytokine interactions and in this space and what you were talking about, like what the levels are, in the sense of, are you trying to get them higher? Are you trying to get them lower? What, that.
Okay. Thank
Does
you for
that
that
make sense?
question, Lisa. And thank you for explaining what happened with your health during the pandemic. I really appreciate that. So I think, number one, this is going to be a really good topic to fold into our third session in August. So if you want to reach out to me specifically and give me the name again, I do recognize the name of the condition, but if there's anything more you want to share via email, I would like to look into that a little bit more specifically if I could. Remember, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a curious epidemiologist, but I can answer with confidence that the cytokines are very helpful first responders. They are involved in having us develop a fever when we get sick. And that fever is really important to fending off progression of infection. So it causes the nucleic acids, the RNA and the DNA of viruses and bacteria to fall apart. So when you heat them up, they fall apart. So that's one of our body's first responses to infection, is to ramp up the cytokines, send all of the signaling messages out there in the body, and cause things like fever. So generally speaking, you asked, do we want cytokines up or down? We want to bring them back down. And one of the reasons why they can go up is the stress response, causing that leaky gut, causing things to leak out of the gut and get into the places where they really shouldn't, and that your immune system wants to help you out. And it sends out the cytokines, and they may be at a persistently elevated level.
They are. Yeah, that's what's going on. So, so in relation to these foods, are there ones that all of what you were saying reduces the cytokine levels? Is that correct?
Doing everything you can to optimize your diet this way, with really bringing in the probiotics and the prebiotics, will help bring inflammation down. Generally eating, junk foods and super processed foods are going to drive the inflammatory process the other way. So focusing on a diet more like this will help, hopefully help.
Reduce cytokines.
Yeah, by
Gotcha.
sealing up the junctions in the gut. Because again, remember, if we're not giving the microbes what they need to eat, then they're going to digest things we really don't want them to digest.
Gotcha.
And so that mucosal layer, they kind of start digesting that as a backup supply of food, but that's the layer that keeps our mucosal membranes intact, which keeps things on the right side of that mucosal barrier in your intestines, keeps things inside instead of leaking out. So we want to keep those cells tight and keep that mucosal lining intact.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Before we take another question, I just have a question. Did everybody, or is everyone able to download the certificate in the chat? That's the first question. If there's any no's, put it in the chat. I am going to hang out for a few minutes. Allie, are you comfortable sharing slides or something of that nature?
Yeah, do people want the slide deck?
Yeah, they want the slide deck.
Sure, it's massive. So I would suggest that I'll share it via PDF like I did with you.
Okay, I have the PDF and I have everybody's, I think I have everybody's contact information. I'll go ahead and send that out. I could do that right afterwards.
Okay.
And then the next question was about, and we'll hang out if anybody, I know I can hang out if anybody, I don't know about Allie, but the question is, are finely chopped mushrooms, spinach, and zucchini prebiotics?
I would like to research that because I'm not sure. My gut says yes, they are. But I would like to research that and get back to you. And I can respond via email. If you email me directly, Allie@coachallie.com, I'll reply. I hate to answer things with assurance that I am not 100% convinced of.
Okay. All right. So I can hang out for 5 minutes and we can talk about anything you want to talk about. I want to thank everybody for being present. And most importantly, I want to thank Allie for her expertise and for sharing with us today. We are so looking forward to the next sessions in July and August. And yeah, July 27th and August 24th. And just excited for this summer series, and I hope it's been of benefit to you. So without further ado, if you need to jump off, jump off. Anybody that can stay on, we'll hang out for a few minutes and let's hear what's on your mind. I'm going to stop recording too.
Okay.